this is such a cool thing. Nothing like this existed at all when I was at Duke. So it's really fun to see something that I didn't even know was a career now become like almost kind of mainstream. So this is really cool to see. I'm really excited to see what you all are going to make. Also, I see everyone's all over the world. So thanks for joining at all kinds of times of the day. And I hope everybody is safe and healthy. Okay, I'm using Yoko Ono to like anchor my talk because I studied art history and I really came to appreciate her and a lot of her performance art work. So, okay, Yoko, little pep talk. I'm gonna do my best to give us some advice that will make our lives heal and shine. I'm gonna talk about how teams work together and how design is a team sport. So a designer I used to work with at Etsy, Maya Bruck, once told me that design was a team sport. And I don't know about you, but I used to screw up team sports a lot as a high schooler when I had to play them once I broke somebody's finger. So it's nice to have a little bit of guidance. How can we bring together expertise and perspectives and personalities of a bunch of different people on team to make stuff and, you know, dare I say, have fun, because that's kind of the whole point. Everyone thinks it's really all about ideas. We like glorify ideas, having a good idea, but everyone has ideas. The idea part is easy. One of my Duke professors, Anya Belkina, who's not there anymore, she told me you can have lots of ideas and it's important to write them all down because your first idea usually sucks and then you can throw it away. So that's not hard. Figuring out the real problem and agreeing on the solution and executing on it, you know, quickly and well, that's the hard part. And the only way you can do that is if your team all is rowing the boat in the same direction. The team has to trust and rely on each other, know what they're responsible for. So I'm not really going to talk about hard design skills today. I saw there's some other talks about Figma and other things, you know, in the schedule. So please go to those talks too. I'm not going to teach you how to animate your prototype, but I'm going to teach you about all the soft stuff that is going to take your work from good to great. So who the heck am I to give you advice on any of this stuff? I graduated from Duke in 2007. I had no idea what I was going to do. I ended up majoring in art history and visual arts. Probably there's a lot of engineers in this group today. I almost minored in like 4 other things because I just took classes in calculus and bio and economics and sociology and English. I got out of school, graphic design sounded cool, so I got a job paying nothing in New York City. And eventually they asked me to make websites because I could code. And I realized I was making really bad websites. So I did some continuing education and I was like, oh, UX sounds cool. I should get a job doing that. So I got a job at Shutterstock and I worked on a bunch of different teams there, mostly on stock video. And I helped them create their first music site. I made a video editor while I was there. And then I got a job at Etsy and I worked on easily a dozen different teams. And I got to you know, become a manager there. So then I started managing teams, which really made me think about how people work together and setting people up for success. And then this year I've been at Mailchimp, which has also been super fun. And I've spent a few months managing the design systems team and a bunch of other teams. So that's been super cool. I don't have any formal HCI or technical background. So this is going to be based on my lived experience on the job at these basically mid-sized tech companies, not like a 10,000 designer IBM and not like a 2 designer startup or 1 designer startup. I saw there's a talk about that later too. So take what's useful and leave what isn't. So I assume you have some idea of what product design is because you're here, but it's not in the dictionary. And so today, what I'm going to be talking about when I say product design is making digital stuff, apps, websites, interfaces, and working with the people who also plan and build and market and measure those products. So in school, we really focus on hard skills and problem solving. And that's important, but you can't overlook the rest of the picture. You know, you by yourself can probably create a pretty good vision and strategy and a design and even build it yourself, you know, if you're also technical, but that doesn't tend to scale. In most workplaces, you know, we work as a team. So soft skills, collaboration, empathy, and leadership are some of the most valuable skills for a designer. I cannot emphasize that enough. When I'm hiring people, I know I can teach someone a hard skill. If their prototyping's like not that good, or they need a little help using a design system, that's okay, but it's a lot harder to teach someone to work collaboratively with other people. Most of you are, I think current students. So how many times have you been assigned to a group project where you see your group and you're like, oh my God, what's this gonna be like? Who's gonna be, the big mouth leader? Who's gonna be the slacker? Who's gonna like just present at the end and take all the credit? You kind of like, feeling out what your team's gonna be like. So this is one model of kind of stages that teams go through as they're coming together. It's written by this guy, Bruce W. Tuckman. It's from 1965, but I can tell you this has rung true for every team that I've been a part of. He wrote this short article called Developmental Sequence in Small Groups. And he also studied procrastination quite a lot, so a fun one to look up if you're anything like me. So being conscious of these stages can help your team be more effective, because you can say like, oh yeah, we're in the storming stage right now. Okay, so these 4 stages, the first is forming. This is when you're kind of excited, you're anxious, you're just coming together, you have a lot of questions. So this one, it's good to create some structure to create trust. And you can use this to kind of kick off. So you can say, okay, these are the roles you're gonna do, these are the times that we're gonna meet, this is what you're gonna do by the next time we meet. And just like really setting shared expectations. The next phase is storming. This is the part that like feels a little icky, it kind of, the clouds roll in, people get frustrated because things weren't going the way they wanted to. Maybe something wasn't communicated right. You have to start resolving conflict. It gets a little less polite. And so at this point, it's really good to break stuff down into smaller, achievable pieces and then figure out what was working and not working from the way that you're with your team. Then there's a phase called norming, where you're kind of coming out of that storming dip. There's some resolution, people get more inclusive, it's more flexible, you have some rapport with your teammates, so you can have some healthy conflict, give people more productive feedback. You can ask for help, and this is when a team starts to have some camaraderie. And then there's the performing stage, where you're like really cruising along, you have a team identity, you feel good, you know the skills of your teammates, and then you can use that knowledge to flex your roles a little bit. So, I'm a designer who can code, and so if, an engineer needs some help doing front end so they can have more time to do back end, and I have some bandwidth, I can totally jump in and do that. And that's when you really get into your accomplishments. Okay, Yoko, some advice to make us heal and shine. Setting ground rules is also really important. And usually this is in the norming stage in the beginning. We all know we're supposed to be nice to each other and be respectful, right? Everybody knows that, but sometimes that can go right out the window when someone's feeling slighted or not like they don't like what's going on. So this does not cover abuse and harassment kind of stuff. That is obviously, never to be tolerated, but these kinds of rules, if you agree on them as a team, you can point to them and say like, oh, I can hear you're a little frustrated. Let's try to keep our tone respectful and productive and growth oriented. So first of all, just like be mindful of how you show up with that respectful, productive, growth oriented, because that is really contagious. If you show up in a group and you're excited and you're smiling, that makes all the difference as to like whether you show up in a group and you're kind of like not looking at anybody and also like doing Twitter on the side or something like that. Also being open and honest is really important. So, don't let stuff fester if you have a worry about the project, or you can't do all the things that people have asked you to do. It's way more important to say that in the beginning. The third is ask questions. And this sounds, again, really simple, but you have to just you have to be comfortable enough to admit when you don't know something. And it's hard for smart people, Duke students, other students, it's hard for us who have been really high achievers to admit you don't know a thing, but it's gonna be worse if you're, weeks in or days in or hours in and you still don't know it. Somebody uses an acronym you don't know, say like, hey, what the heck does that stand for? Or I was on a team that had an algorithm called ponycorn, and I had no idea what they were talking about one day. I was like, what is a ponycorn? So just ask. And the fourth rule that I like to recommend is just everyone participates. So again, like maybe you're a little bit shy, or maybe your attention split, or whatever it is, but find a way to participate that feels authentic to you. Now we've talked a little bit about building trust and setting shared expectations. Now a little bit about roles. So usually at a tech company, when you're working, there's usually 3 main roles on a team. There are 1,000 other roles, but these are the 3 kind of like main ones. And often people refer to them as like a triangle or like a 3-legged stool. You can get away with two legs on your stool, but you can't do it for that long. You get tired. It's not really stable. It's not a great solution. So typical teams have product managers, designers, and engineers. I'm not going to read through this literal whole slide because we'll share the slides later, but product managers usually do the what and the when. A lot of like, some people have called them the single ringable neck. The strategy and vision, often responsible for pulling data and measuring success, prioritizing work of like, what's the highest impact thing that we can do now, planning releases, that kind of stuff. Design, that's what we're all doing here today. So definitely being part of the strategy and vision and driving that as well. Creating the designs, flows, interactions, visuals, prototypes, all of that kind of stuff. Make sure you get feedback on your design so other people can use it, even if it's just someone sitting next to you. And then, engineering is the third one. So how are we going to build this? When are we going to build it? So actually putting the whole thing together, and engineers should also, very much be involved in the strategy and vision. This also seems super obvious, really hard to do. So remember when I said the first idea is probably not the best idea? I should probably throw that one away. This seems obvious, right? And this is a pretty standard part of design thinking, but if you're on a team with product managers and engineers, they're not thinking about design thinking or your beautiful double diamond process. That sounds like something a designer should do. It's called design thinking. So designers need to be facilitators and bring their whole team into this way of tackling problems. So again, soft skills are really important here. You might be working with a product manager who says, okay, what I have on the roadmap next, we need to redesign the search filters. And you're like, yeah, but like, why? What's the customer problem that's solving? What's the business problem that's solving? What do we know about this already? Like, what's making you say this? Let's dig a lot deeper. So here's an example. I got this, and again, I'll share all the slides and everything is linked so you can go deeper. This is from a Harvard Business Review article I read. So Downtown Dog Rescue in Los Angeles piloted something called the Shelter Intervention Program. I think the head of the shelter was Lori Weiss. So what they found out, they had this problem, right? There are too many dogs in the shelter. And everyone assumed it was because bad dog owners who like weren't committed to their pets were bringing their dogs back. And so what all of the shelters were doing was doing like really intensive screenings for people who wanted to adopt dogs. It's good to screen someone who wants to take a dog so you're not putting them in a dangerous situation, but this wasn't really solving their problem. And they found when they dug a little bit deeper that 30% of the dogs entering the shelter, 30%, that's like a third, that reduction would be huge, were because owners were surrendering them back to the shelter. So talking to these people, these owners love their dogs, but they're usually dealing with pretty severe poverty. So people thought the problem was bad dog owners, but really it was maybe they couldn't afford a rabies shot, they couldn't afford a deposit on their apartment to be able to keep their pet. So what they did is they started the Shelter Intervention Program, which was cheaper and more effective than taking the dogs back and doing all these screenings. So what they did is they said, okay, we'll pay $10 for your dog to get a rabies shot. We can give you a grant of $400 to have a deposit to keep your dog in the apartment. They were helping keep these families together. Toyota has this very famous methodology called the 5 whys. So again, so you go through this, you say, okay, there's too many dogs. Why are there too many dogs? Why are people bringing them back? And you usually don't have to go all the way down to 5 because then you're going to be solving poverty, which maybe you won't be doing today, but it's just an example. So as you start going through stuff like this and trying to get to the real problem, you'll be having ideas. And I just recommend, write them down, write them down, write them down. Don't forget them. They might be good, but you're still trying to figure out what the problem is. And then next, with your team, you want to figure out how to share context. So in the last example, there were a lot of dogs, they needed more information. The first thing, competitive analysis. What are other shelters doing to solve this problem? They're doing intensive screenings, and that's not working. Okay, so let's look around and see what other people are doing. 2, data and analytics. So these are the quantitative things. This will tell you what is happening. So we know 30% of dogs are coming back from surrenders, maybe some percentage are coming from animal control, maybe some percentage people bring them in that found them on the street, wherever these animals are coming from. And then 3 is user research and qualitative feedback. So you can know what's happening, but you can't know why it's happening unless you're actually also talking to people. So this is when they're asking more questions about like, well, do you want to bring the dog back? Do you not like the dog? You can't afford the dog. Well, how much money would you need to be able to solve that problem? That kind of thing. And then 4, open questions. You're going to have a ton of questions while you're going through this stuff. And again, write them down, keep track, and then you can figure out which ones are really key to answering. How much does it cost to keep a dog in the shelter? How long are dogs here? How much would it cost to run a program to help people keep their pets? How would we raise the money? That kind of stuff. And then 5 is an exercise called Stinky Fish, which is from a toolkit I'll link to later from an agency called Hyper Island. This is a metaphor for a thing you carry around, but you don't like to talk about it. And the longer you hide it, the stinkier it gets. So this is like, what are your concerns about the solution you're coming up with? What are the risks, the silent worries? And this doesn't mean like kill the idea, but find out the weaknesses of what your idea are, what you can keep an eye on. And often someone will find something that's fixable that didn't occur to the rest of the group. So again, you'll be having more ideas going through all this context sharing. Write them down, write them down, write them down with your group. Sometimes maybe after each kind of information, it's good to go around and just start sharing the ideas you have so people can build off of each other. Okay, Yoko. So we've built trust, we've agreed on our roles, we've had some structure, we've defined our problem, we shared all the context, we've been writing down our ideas. Erin, can we make stuff? Yes, yes, now's the time where you can do the brainstorming and the designing and the making of stuff. And this part is just so easy and fun, and people always really enjoy this. So, enjoy creating, and then other people can enjoy what you're making. That's the really exciting bit. For that moment, you are making the planet smile. Okay. Couple notes on doing brainstorms. We all feel like we know how to brainstorm. You sit in a room with some paper with your friends, with your team, and you're like, what if we did this? What if we did this? And someone's kind of writing it down. People are being like, no, yes, I don't know. There are a lot of ways to brainstorm. How do we do it in such a way that one person's ideas aren't dominating? It's not just the loudest, or at work, the highest paid person in the room. The slang for that is hippo, highest paid person, which can take up all the space. So, be consciously inclusive. And a lot of times this means having someone who's the designated facilitator. So, make sure everybody is lifted up and having fun as a team. So one example about, being consciously inclusive is, ability. So I'm working at Mailchimp. I've been co-leading the design systems team with a super talented, just like angel genius of an engineer. He happens to be deaf. And the way that we run our meetings is such that we do our meetings over Slack. So we all open up Zoom so we can see each other's faces and we can get that body language, but everything that we're saying goes into Slack. And this actually has a lot of side benefits, which is, we're forced to usually set an agenda ahead of time. We'll have different threads so we can continue talking about multiple topics at the same time. And then at the end of the meeting, you have a meeting transcript. So you can go back and reference what people said or go back to links, all that kind of stuff. Also with personalities, shouting out ideas doesn't work if you're quiet and introverted. You're not gonna be the loudest talker. So maybe you have some quiet time to work, and then each person takes a turn sharing their ideas. So try different ways to turn over the problem. And also a lot of times it's good to do an icebreaker to get everybody talking. I really recommend this. So, you know, ask some question like, you know, if you could have any beverage right now, what would it be? If you could turn into a magical animal with the snap of your fingers, what would it be? It gets people like really warmed up. But when asking these questions, also be mindful of, you know, background and race and identity, that maybe a question you're asking is going to be private or not applicable to everybody in the group. So different facilitation methods. This could totally be its own talk. So one I call wild dates, which you've probably heard of. It's like very standard. You take a piece of printer paper and you fold it into 8 pieces. Someone says like, okay, draw ideas that solve X, and everybody sketches 8 different ways to solve a problem. Another one that I really like that was introduced to me by a designer, Henry Bayuzek, that I used to work with, is that you would think about what could you do to make this problem worse. And this one's also just really fun and goofy. So it can identify, you know, the same triggers and the dials that you can use to make change in the right direction. You just think about how to turn them in the wrong direction. It's like, what if I was like Evil Corp, what would I do here? And then I'm linking here to this Hyper Island toolbox, which I really like for getting more ideas for these kinds of activities. Okay, also think about the fidelity of how you're working. Always try to keep it really loose to start and show your work early. Share your work early, get feedback early before you've put all that effort. I'm so glad the way that the projects in this design-a-thon are set up such that, you know, on one track, you're only supposed to do one screen of visual design. That's amazing. So, and also sketches are like less precious, and the less precious it is, the easier it is to change. It's good to come in with these, you know, like strong ideas and then be really flexible for, you know, going down a different path. A little note on getting feedback. There's a designer I used to manage at Etsy, Kate Matsumoto, really strong designer, and I loved working with her. She had like this huge sense of humor. She wrote a blog post about sharing work fearlessly, getting early feedback. And it starts off with this: knowing the right time to show your work is kind of like knowing when to slice it into an avocado. Not ready, not ready, not ready, too late. If you save it and you're precious, then, you know, it gets close to shipping, and then maybe your boss sees it, you know, and they're like, wow, that's terrible. Please don't ship that. You wasted, you know, like 3 weeks on that. So better to kind of like be really transparent in the way that you're working. And so this is a little bit about how a lot of teams, this is like loosely based on the Agile methodology. Some people get really into that and get, you know, like certified as Scrum Masters, you know, run this. I think all of these touch points have a reason, and you should be flexible for what works for your team. And again, this is usually like a 2-week process, but you can flex it to whatever your time frame is. So roughly, you'd start out with planning at the top here. So, you know, what problem are we going to solve? How long are we going to do it? Who's going to do which parts? How complex do we expect that to be? And kind of like dividing up the work. And then you'll usually have a project kickoff where that's when you sit down and you really like define the problem. Okay, what are we really trying to solve? What do we know about it? Do you have any early ideas? Do we have any competitive analysis? You know, like let's get in our small group and really share what we know. And then you'll usually have a critique or check-in where you're like, okay, here's what I came up with. What do you think? And then you'll commit to a path. You'll build that. You'll have a demo where you say, great, this is what we built. This is where we are. It's a really nice celebratory moment for a team to come together. And then also, I really recommend that teams do retros. Some people skip this, but I think it's really important. This is when you sit down and say, okay, so for next time, what went well? What went badly? What should we stop doing? What should we start doing? What kind of open questions do we have as a team? And someone might say like, hey, you know, I didn't know that this whole track of work was going on, and I actually had this like magic key that would have unlocked it. How can we do this differently? So that kind of stuff. And it's really easy to make all of these meetings fun and give them your own flavor. Give your team a silly name. You know, do stretches before design crit as part of your team ritual. Make a team cheer at the end of stand-up. Stand-up is usually like a daily or a couple times a week check-in for just how everything's going. get bubble tea every Friday, you know, like whatever floats your boat. You know, and also that kind of leads into just like the positive energy that you can bring to your group. It's so important to express gratitude to your team. And this is something that I really think about as a manager. I've been managing 6 people this year, and, you know, keeping their work on track, making sure they have what they need, thinking about their career development, all that kind of stuff. And it's so important, I think, to really celebrate them, tell them, you know, and this is important with the team too, tell them what you admire about them, give an example, give people feedback, give them an example of something that they did and the impact it had on the project. You know, how did that make it better? How did it make you happier to come to the group? And say thank you, you know, and all of this like positive psychology literature, which, you know, some of it can be really fluffy, but some of it can be helpful. You know, this shows up as a key practice. It makes you feel better. It makes that person feel better. How good does it feel to have someone else tell you you did a good job? So just find something to appreciate and share that. I just want to share, you know, some quick resources. If you found any of this helpful today and you want to dig a little bit deeper, obviously Figma, pretty widely known, so good for working with the team. Let's Board is also just a really quick way, if you're on a call with somebody, to like whiteboard digitally. You don't even have to create an account, you just like start drawing stuff. And then Miro, I don't know if anybody's using Miro, but it basically is like virtual stickies and you can make flowcharts and that kind of stuff. It's also, I think, free. It has like a freemium kind of model. And then a handful of books that are super, super good. This one, The Design of Everyday Things, just made me like really love thinking about how design can be useful in solving problems for people. It's a really light read. I highly recommend this. This one looks really fluffy, but it's so good. Nonviolent Communication, just like how to talk to people in a respectful way, but like also like an entertaining light read, and a thing that I think everybody that I've ever met can do better at, including myself. This Discussing Design book is amazing. You really only have to read the middle of it. You can skip the very, very long intro. It's about how to give good, productive design feedback. Sometimes you get in a room and you're like, I just don't like it. But articulating why you don't like it, or, you know, going back always to what's the problem you're solving, what's the hypothesis of like why your solution solves that problem. Hey, I made this bigger on the page. It's the darkest color. It's the whatever, to draw attention to it. What's the most important thing someone needs to do on a page? So all that kind of stuff. And then if you want to read more about, you know, the team stuff, this Inspired, How to Create Products People Love by Marty Kagan. I've like been in this guy's workshop 3 times because every company I go to keeps hiring him to come do workshops, and he's just like a delightful human and talks really well about how to work transparently and focus on getting customer feedback. So, you know, with that, going into this weekend of making and designing, I just want to send you all lots of good luck, warm, fuzzy thoughts for working together, you know, finding your team, working together on your team. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. And I'll be one of the judges tomorrow, and I'm really excited to see what you all create. So I think I talked fast enough to have time for some Q&A. So if you want to pop any questions into the Zoom, I will do my darndest to answer them. I'm also going to stop screen sharing so that I can see everybody's video a little bit better.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erin. I feel like I learned so much these past 30 minutes, and this was such a great opening talk for our conference this weekend. So yeah, feel free to pop a question into the chat, anything related to team formation or any questions you have. Cool. I think we have our first one.
What has been your favorite project to work on so far, if I can choose? Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. I worked on this project at Etsy that does not exist anymore, but it was kind of like a sub-brand called Etsy Studio, and it was a website for, you know, small business people or like individuals to sell craft supplies. And I got to work with just like the most talented, kind team, and we had a ton of autonomy, and I felt like the output of that team was just, I was like constantly delighted by what everybody was making. We were moving really fast. We were really listening to customers. The designs were just like really awesome. And so that was kind of like a little golden hour in my career. Not that the other stuff hasn't been good. Hi, Erin. How is your team dynamic? Stacy. Okay, so it's Stacy who sent me a private question. I used to mentor through a mentoring program a couple of years ago when she was in high school. How has your team dynamic changed during the pandemic, and how have you adapted to that? Yeah, it has changed. Well, something that's a little bit unusual is, so I'm working for Mailchimp, and Mailchimp is based in Atlanta, and I live in New York. They also have a New York office. New York was like a little harder hit by COVID and a little earlier. And so I was kind of used to being remote from a lot of the people that I was working with in Atlanta. So I was pretty comfortable already like being on Zoom all day, managing people remotely even. And it's kind of like weirdly put me on an even footing with them. So a lot of times there would be a bunch of people in a room in Atlanta together, and like I would be Zooming in. And now we're all on video, which is kind of, it's, you know, in some ways it's kind of great. Hi, Erin, any advice for a team with little artistic design experience? Yes, I would leverage, if you're not particularly visual or artistic, which honestly many designers are not, leaning on a design system or just agreeing on, you know, like a kit of parts in the beginning can be really good. You can look at something like IBM's Carbon. Part of Mailchimp's design system is public. There are, you know, Uber, lots and lots of public design systems. You can kind of lean on that as a starting point. Do not copy them, obviously, but you know, just kind of create like, okay, this is what our buttons are going to look like. This is what our links are going to look like. Just try to keep it simple, and you know, don't worry too much about that. What's a challenge you faced, and how did your team overcome it? That's a really good question. So many. I have to think about that a little bit more and maybe come back. I have to think of one that's like a good example to kind of share more widely. What would you suggest to a person who's new to designing and would like to pursue that? I would suggest talking to people who do that. There's a program that I'm not doing it right now, but I've done it several times in the past. It was called Built by Girls, and it's a mentorship program to get women in tech paired with high school, you know, young women. And they can, you know, list different interests. And for example, people that I mentored would like come to my office and we'd sit down, we'd talk about what I was doing. We'd do some pretend, you know, mock projects, that kind of stuff. So I would just, you know, encourage you to like do some reading and, you know, talk to people who are actually doing that job. Even like take one online class or something and see if you like it. It's a much cheaper way to just kind of like try it out that way. Any advice on the product video? That's a good question. Keep it simple is probably the best way. Showing a flow, showing, you know, what the benefit is to your thing. I don't have deep advice on that, but probably the facilitators of this do. Someone sharing some free illustrations. You might see in my presentation, I used just like a ton of free stock images from Unsplash. That's also a good place to just like grab something. There's lots of stuff in the public domain. So public domain review is also a good place to just grab some stuff. Office hours, yeah, for sure. Cool. Did I miss any?
Yeah, we can definitely take like maybe 2 to 3 more questions if anyone has them. And feel free to also like DM Erin if you're not comfortable putting it in the large chat.
For sure. The audience seems decently diverse. What would you say is the gender and background distribution of designers at the places you've worked? And how does that impact your work? Oh, such a good question. Yeah, I mean, I tend to use that as a bit of a litmus test when I am interviewing for jobs too. So I tend to choose places to work that are decently diverse, where I can see that diversity in leadership, where I know, all kinds of people can feel comfortable coming to the office. So Etsy was, I would say, a pretty diverse workplace. They're, not across every demographic, but it was, I was on several different teams with people who are trans. I had people, on my team of like many different ethnicities and backgrounds and people from different countries. And that, I think, made the work a lot stronger because, first of all, it brought different perspectives, which is one of the things that really makes a team stronger. So someone, who's from another country would have a totally different app store available to them, sometimes on Apple, right? So they'd say like, oh, actually, I'm really used to using these apps, and let me talk to you about how product design in China is really different. And being able to share that perspective with the group is like so valuable. And Mailchimp too, I would say, is pretty good on diversity. Most big companies can get better for sure. But again, I'm like co-leading a team with someone who's deaf, people of all different colors and backgrounds, and that's something that when I hire people, I really look at the makeup of the team, and I want to interview people of different backgrounds. The last couple people I hired all had brought something different to the table, and that I think is really important. What's a skill you picked up you didn't think would be necessary to understanding to design, but has been very important? Facilitation, I would say. When I first became a designer, I was like, cool, I'm gonna make the best designs. They're gonna look really good. I'm gonna solve the customer problem. I really thought it was all about hard skills. But as I've kind of been talking about today, collaboration is so important. I do not expect to have the best ideas. It's not my job to have the best idea. I actually honestly don't care if I have the best ideas. It's really important to make sure the best idea gets airtime and that other people can hear about it and think about it. So I didn't think of myself as a great facilitator when I became a designer, and that's really something I have, I think, grown into and become more comfortable with. I took a personality quiz lately, and it put me like deep in the introvert corner. And I was like, well, that's funny because I like facilitate people all day long and I manage people. And they put me in this corner where it was like, you love people, but you also don't want to talk to anybody. So yeah, so I would say facilitation is a skill. How do you keep the energy dynamic of your team positive and fun? Celebrate people. Take 10 minutes to like ask people how their weekend was, how their kids are, what they ate for dinner this weekend that they thought was really great. I would say just like spending some time getting to know the people that you're working with. And kind of like I was saying before, like make time to celebrate, say like, okay, every Friday our team, gets burritos, whatever it is, like make that time to spend time with the people that you're working with. And just the way you show up, right? If you show up and smile and you're encouraging, that's huge. How do you suggest we formulate design ideas for the health track if we don't have much knowledge in the healthcare field or don't fully understand the problem it's facing? I might leave this one to the facilitators to answer afterwards. I feel like I don't want to give weird guidance about the challenge.
Yeah, we can definitely cover it during our FAQ, like right after Erin's FAQ.
Maybe I'll just do like one or two more. Does that sound about right? Okay.
Yeah.
I know I'm not going to get to all of them. I am in the Slack channel. I do have a toddler who will come home any minute. So I won't be on Slack all day long, but I'll check in a couple times. And so if you do want to message me other questions, I'll see what I can do. From your experience, what actionable steps can budding designers do to help contribute to combating inequality within design? Oh my gosh, there's so much. One is just like demand it. Like I think, and no person in a leadership position at a company that you're going to work at is ever going to say like, that's not important, first of all, because that's illegal. And second of all, because that's like a really bad look. And so just showing up and like, expressing that's important. I'm in a position where I get to hire people, right? Like part of being a manager is I get to pick who's on the team. And, so like really thinking about is our team representative of, the country that I'm working in or the city that I'm working in? Are we recruiting in the right places? Are we recruiting from historically Black colleges and universities, all that kind of stuff. I think so, being really proactive. And then also just like talking to people about it. It's not going to get better if you just like worry about it personally. So I think talking about it, protesting, all this kind of stuff is like, probably not at work, but just making it clear when you think it's a problem and when we can do better. What's your opinion on going through boot camps for design? Are they worth the cost to adequately prepare for work and getting a job? It's a really good question. Usually when I am hiring people, the most important thing is that I can see in their portfolio some of this process that I've talked through, right? They identified a problem, they had a bunch of ideas, tried out a bunch of different ways to solve it. It came to a resolution. They, the resolution, the solution looks good, it's usable. They know how to talk about their work. They have some evidence that they can collaborate. They can think about using data and user research in their work, that kind of stuff. So I think often a boot camp is a good way to kind of like dip your toes in and see if it's for you and like learn about those different skills. Are they worth the cost? There are so many different ways, to do that. But also, try like an internship, try something like that, especially when you're a student. If you can swing that out, that's I think can be a really good way to get your feet wet. When I moved from graphic design into, my title then was UX designer, I didn't do a boot camp. I had made a lot of crappy websites. I found a brand that needed some like visual design love, and I was very strong in that. And then I had taken some continuing education courses. So I had taken some like night classes at NYU in usability and doing user research. And I'd done some projects, like some freelance projects on the side. And, by building up that body of work and then being able to talk about it coherently, I think is what got me that job. So yeah, just try to get some experience and be able to demonstrate your skills. I have retweeted a couple of times, and I'm happy to like send it again. Someone had created like a long Twitter thread of how to make a really good portfolio. I will be very happy to share that in the Slack as well. So many other questions, but if you wanna like DM me your question on Slack, I'll see what I can reply to tonight. There are like lots of good follow-ups and stuff.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks again, Erin, for sharing all your wisdom and experiences with us, and thank you to everyone for being so active and asking so many great questions. Yeah, we're really glad you're able to be our keynote speaker. And so in terms of logistics and what's up next, Michelle and I will be remaining on this call for about 30 minutes if you have any questions, but we'll also be starting team formation at 1 p.m. Eastern on Glimpse, which is a really cool app for meeting people. I think Michelle will be dropping a link for that in the general channel on Slack, and you'll be able to select like which tracks you're interested in and your experience level and meet people of similar interests as well through that. So yeah, lots to look forward to, but thank you again, Erin.
Happy to be here, and good luck over the weekend, everybody.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess for people who have questions, should we just do the same thing with like dropping a question in the chat, or?